So with that, I want to start with a really broad question about what each of you would see as the main challenges that AI poses to how we think about economic measurement and to your jobs collecting the statistics. And we'll go down the line, please, Jennifer, so you start.
Sure. So some of the challenges for AI measurement are the quickly changing technology and having to keep pace in that. We have a number of surveys and labor surveys that we're doing to measure AI, and they've been successful, but it's hard to keep a consistent time series when the baseline is always changing, is one thing that I've noticed. There's also been a lot of demand for looking at the productivity impact due to AI, and that's something that's really hard to disentangle from just general productivity measures. What is really due to the AI versus other factors, and that's one area where we have had some issues. Maintaining expertise in terms of knowing where things are going, and the increasing user needs. Making sure that we maintain relevance. I think this time around we're in better shape. Previously, sometimes when there were new phenomena, we waited until it became big, missed measuring the rise of certain phenomena, and only caught it when it was top. This time around, we're making sure we catch it earlier so we can do a better job of measuring the rise. So I think we have that covered. And to make sure that we can be responsive to user needs, to the questions that are coming about due to AI and AI measurement. In a country such as Canada, a lot of the AI companies themselves are not necessarily Canadian, so we have a cross-border element that we have to think about. And I think we need to have a complete measure, but we also want to avoid duplication. If something is being measured elsewhere perfectly well, I don't think our resources should go to that. So maximizing the information that's out there, but still having a comprehensive and systematic system. So those are a few of the challenges I see.
I think we'll come back to some of those. One immediate follow-up I have is that Canada, of course, has some excellent AI labs itself and is somewhat distinctive in that way. Is that something you track specifically?
We do through research and development and our innovation surveys. We do capture some of that. What we have found is that we have a lot of labs. We have rich research. It's putting it into production that is less noticeable in the Canadian economy.
Thank you. Chris?
I'm going to say something very similar, I guess. For those of you who don't work in NSI, you probably have the same thing, but when we sit around a coffee table, we're chatting about this all the time. And the big challenge for me with AI is, can I get all my guys to move off chatting about it as a tool and something they're having fun with and saving time with, to thinking about measurement for the whole economy? All right, so can we move on to this issue around, and it really does come down to productivity for me too. So there's excellent work on what AI is doing to the labor market, and we're seeing the private sector helping there too, with Indeed and LinkedIn, documenting impact on the labour market. But then we'll start looking at corporate profitability. Can we really disentangle, I think Jennifer got at this quite well, the AI effect from all the other effects that we're seeing? In Ireland, we have a big tech sector, a big US tech sector exporting into Europe. Huge amounts of their sales, including all their AI work, being exported into Europe. Those firms, we have really good quarterly data from those firms. Can I disentangle all of that, the benefits of AI for them from everything else they're doing? And that's the big challenge, I think, for me.
And Grant?
Well, I'm going to break Cicero's advice of rules of 3 or 5 to give you 4. The first, and it's kind of briefly mentioned already, but for those who followed the history of UK economic statistics, some would remember the Bean report, the Independent Review of Economic Statistics, a decade ago. And Bean basically said the ONS need more economic analysis, they need to make greater use of big data, they need to better capture the digital revolution that's occurring in the economy, and modernise its statistical production. And I think all of those things, which were really driven by computerization and where we've been on the internet and all the rest over the last decade or two, are just as true for AI. So in some ways, there's a bit of a sense of deja vu that we've seen this movie before. I think the difference is that putting the sort of California hype to one side, I am convinced that AI could be extremely disruptive and fundamentally change how business and the economy operates. The big question, though, I think the two big unknowns is, how much better it will get from where it is now and how fast the pace of change will be. And we know already that varies across different countries. It varies between the public and private sector, but nonetheless, it's coming. So I think the issue of modernisation, relevance, keeping up with the rapidly changing economy is just as true now as it was when Charlie Bean wrote that report, but even more so, because the pace of change does seem to be accelerating. The second point, again, this is not something that's driven by AI, but it's been around for a while now, is the challenge of data collection, particularly of survey-based data collection, where no one under 40 wants to sit in their living room with an interviewer for 50 minutes doing a labour force survey, but they might be willing to just spend 5 or 10 minutes on their mobile phone filling out a survey. So, we, like other national statistics, are in the middle of kind of a modal shift from face-to-face to digital. But that does come at a cost, because you're basically introducing a structural break into your time series, and you are not, by its very nature, able to collect as much data as you had before, which means you need to look for other ways of capturing that. Now, again, that's not specifically AI, that's really more about the broader internet, digital, smartphone world that we live in. But I do think data collection is becoming a greater challenge, and increasingly we and others are looking to use administrative data and other more high-frequency data that's available to supplement or in some cases replace survey-based data collection. And again, I think that challenge will accelerate. The third is kind of something that I've already mentioned, big data, real-time indicators, high-frequency data. That is both useful, but also a challenge. Are people going to want to wait around for the official consumer price index when private sector companies can potentially replicate and come up with something that's a reasonably good proxy much faster than we can? And then finally, we're starting to get questions from other departments, and some of those about the impact of AI, and some of those questions we can kind of take a rough kind of guess at, and others we simply don't have the data at the moment. We have data gaps. And so I think a key part of the measurement challenge is identifying what are the questions, what are the issues that people are going to want to know about over the next 5 years, and where are the gaps, and trying to plug those as well as we can. That's in the next 5 years. I think over the next 10 to 15 years, it's quite different. And that's because if you think about the internet as a parallel, we used to stand up e-commerce surveys because we wanted to collect, how much business is generated via the internet or digitally. But I mean, that's almost a meaningless concept these days, where almost everything is mediated digitally. And in the same way, in 5 or 10 or 15 years, almost everything will have embodied AI. And so measuring the AI economy becomes a meaningless concept. So I think in the transition period, huge amount of interest in what the impacts of AI transition will be. But on a 10 to 20 year view, it's going to be like electricity. You hardly even notice it.
So I'm very interested in the gaps and the point you raised, Grant, about how are we going to track the degree of disruption and the transition, and phenomena that we don't measure all that well. So cloud use, data use, how do you categorize AI agents? What's your thinking about what are the gaps that will help us track the disruption as it's going on? You raised it, Grant, so you can start this time.
How do we plug the gaps? Well, a lot of this, certainly in the UK government, is driven by kind of what ministers want to know. And that in turn is often driven by what the media are talking about. I think the big issue in the next couple of years will be around job disruption and job loss. You're starting to see some signs of this in the US. It will no doubt become a thing in the UK as well. And I don't think we've fully conceptualised the different ways in which AI can change the labour market and impact occupations. There's an interesting economic discussion around this, around reinstatement versus displacement, which for those interested is worth having a look at. My point is it's complex. And I think there's a danger of both underestimating and overestimating job displacement. Overestimating, because if you're a CEO whose company is not doing very well because no one wants to buy your product, it's very easy to sack some of your workers and blame it on AI. So you're overstating the AI impact. On the other hand, you can't always interpret the sort of official labour market statistics and really understand what the causal drivers of that are. And I think this reflects a point that statistics are generally a kind of a snapshot in time and don't necessarily readily identify the causal mechanism of what is causing these, both job creation and job destruction. And I do think we need to look beyond that to more longitudinal and causal-based ways of capturing that to supplement the regular statistical outputs that we produce to get a better understanding of what the key drivers are.
So, Chris, you told us about what your priorities are for measuring now. What do you think about the gaps?
Yeah, I think, well, the first thought that occurs to me, especially with an audience like this, is I think we should look for a little bit of help in SIs from researchers on this, right? Because I think there's some thinking to be done about it, not just to rush out. Like, I'm conscious our business surveys, when we ask people, do you use AI? Right? Yeah, right? But I look at I mentioned LinkedIn and indeed the privately held data sources with the intensity of, or how much AI is mentioned in job postings, might give us something a little bit more accurate to identify AI relevant occupations, and if we can track them onto NACE sectors and bring them back into our full suite of publications. But what a good opportunity to open the door and see if anybody else has any other ideas on this too. I think that's the kind of thing we should be doing with a new measurement challenge.
And Jennifer?
Sure. So I would agree that people are worried about jobs. We've more broadly created a tech stat program to help get at some of those data gaps. But in terms of the jobs, we've done some research into the 3 different scenarios. AI will help you do your job, AI has nothing to do with your job, and AI will take your job. And we've looked across industries to see which industries are more susceptible to AI taking your job. I think that's what people are concerned with. That this is, again, is it the short, medium-term phenomena? And as I mentioned earlier, something else that concerns me is making sure that in the evolving landscape that we're there measuring what is actually going on now, what was going on 2 years ago, so that we maintain our relevance, again, somewhere where research can help us.
So, I'm going to do a very unscientific survey of the audience, which is not a representative sample, obviously. So could you put your hand up if you think the biggest gap in the statistics is tracking what's going on with AI and jobs? That's only about 3 hands. Okay. So hands up if you think it's something else that's missing that's most important. So it's basically a dozy audience, but that's about 3 times as many as think it's something else than jobs. So I want to go to somebody who thinks it's something else to chip in and talk to us about the gaps. Who's going to volunteer? No, you put your hands up 2 minutes ago, so you've got to put them up again now. Yes, over here. I think we've got a microphone. Caroline, thank you. It's over the other side, I'm afraid. You can tell this wasn't planned. I'm not supposed to do this. At the side.
Oh.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alison Kilburn. I'm the Chief Economist at the UK's Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, so AI is very clearly within our sort of day-to-day thinking. And while labour markets are clearly an important part, I don't think we have a base understanding of how AI is changing the organisational structures, how it's changing the culture. I think sometimes when we think about it, we think of it as a technology that will just plug and play into organisations, and we know that isn't the case in how it works. And so, to your point, Diane, about, the surveys say, are you using it? There's a whole spectrum of how people are using it. So for us, it's around the culture, the organisation, how things are changing, what is needing to change. I think that's part of the gap as well. The labour markets is something that's very well talked about. And at the moment, because the statistical organisations are a little bit behind the curve on some of the work that the private sector is doing, the private sector doesn't have the quality. We talked a lot about this morning about quality versus speed. There is a gap that's being filled by others in the market, and I think the space where the authorities could be is around that culture as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in on other gaps for NSIs to fill? Chris, over here. Okay, I couldn't see up there, sorry, but let's go to Chris first and then up to the balcony. I can't see you because the light's bad, sorry.
Thanks, Diane. Chris Giles from the Financial Times. I'm going to be very brief. For us, the biggest gap is just the broad accuracy of the statistics themselves. I'm much more interested in getting productivity right. If you looked at today's ONS release on productivity, depending on which labour market data you use, you either get 2% rise over the past year or 0.3% or something like that. I can't quite remember. Having an idea of which one of those is closer to the truth, because they say something very different about the UK economy, is more important than knowing whether AI has driven it or something else.
Thank you. And Chris said productivity is one of his highlights. Yeah, up in the balcony.
This is Michela Vecchi from Kingston University. Just maybe looking more at the optimistic side of AI, do we have any evidence of whether AI is generating new tasks or new jobs? Because after every technological revolution, there have been job distractions, but also job creations. Do we know whether anything... I think that would be something interesting to do, especially for young people who are coming onto the labor market, whether we start seeing some new tasks or new jobs that are complementary with AI.
So that's already a bit of a shopping list for all of you, and I'm sure we could gather some more if you wanted to. And we can come back for more later, we will do. I want to move on the panel to how you think about using AI to produce statistics. Jennifer, I'll come to you first because you mentioned internal expertise and capacity, but there are obviously other things involved as well. So take us away on that one.
Yes, certainly. So earlier this morning, my boss, Andre Loranger, talked about bigger, better, faster, cheaper. Well, we're using AI to get to the cheaper and hopefully the better, so that we can do more. And we're using AI in a number of areas, converting our code for SAS conversion, for metadata harmonization. We use it before we would pore over newspapers. Now news analysis can be aided by AI, classification. We're also using it for data ingestion. So PDFs that were hard to read, now with the help of AI, we can get the data a lot faster and easier with less intervention. As Andre mentioned, for writing some of our articles, for correcting some of the outliers in our data. We have also piloted having some chatbots for respondents and for sending out correspondence with respondent relations. So those are just a few of the examples of how we're using it.
What about Ireland?
Yeah, I guess we've been at this for a while, so this isn't all that new. And we would have called this machine learning a couple of years ago if we're being factual about this. There was no intelligence; it was just, repeating a process. We were very quick to jump into move. We were transferring from SAS code to OR code. Everybody said we couldn't do it. We did it in a few seconds with a little bit of software, and suddenly it opened the door. And it's that kind of thing that converted our statisticians, which are naturally technical people, right? I don't think you're a data analyst without being a little bit tech savvy. It was machine learning too that was writing releases, right? So you're just looking for a field and seeing where it's gone up or down, and you're writing the basic form of those. I was never a huge fan of that. I like the human part of telling a story. Maybe AI will get better and I'll get converted, but for me, I like our guys having a control over the narrative going out the door to make sure it's not stupid, and that we are actually adding value to that data by pointing out the things that we inherently know quite well about it because we collected it. I think there's a big issue for us on our trust in terms of AI use. We've been very cautious rolling out generative AI through the organization and where it's used in sandboxes first, and being very careful about which data it got access to and where it was stored, right? So we were probably a little bit different in that. We've just been really cautious with it, and we're going to just take our time. That fits into the, cloud versus sovereign cloud or on-prem data storage, right? So that's kind of all wrapped up in a conversation for us that we're going to take our time a little bit with it.
So you're doing it all on premises?
No, it's well, the data's stored on-prem, the processing's done. We have a little bit of a mix, but it's a very intensive discussion that we're not agreeing on inside the organization at all. Like, it's really something that we want to spend some time on. But we also have a census coming up for us, and the idea of having the chatbot on census that can help you. We have a question on our form that you're not quite sure what it's about, that chatbot will engage with you and give you that answer about what the question's really about and help you fill out the form. So if the census is going digital and you've got that chatbot hanging out there to help you fill out that question, whether it's ethnicity or gender or something like that, that's how we can upscale our statistics and save a lot of money on that too. So I think we're going to move pretty rapidly towards it. We're trying not to be the first mover, I guess, on it.
Oh, somebody's got to be the first mover.
They do.
Grant, are you going to be the first mover?
Well, like the Canadians and the Irish, we've developed some kind of in-house tools, certainly for data collection. So we've got one that when we collect receipts for our household expenditure survey, uses OCR and text parsing to convert those, and kind of just speeds up the process and frees up people's time. We've got another one that helps speed up classification of industry and occupation. Chatbots on surveys can be very helpful in just helping to kind of nail the question. Those are all kind of fairly standard use cases. I think one has to remember National Statistical Institutes are generally quite conservative organisations. And so there's quite a bit of time just building these tools and checking them and making sure that the quality is at least as good, or generally in the ones that we built better than kind of human coding. And I think what's good about that, even though it's fairly basic AI or machine learning tools, is it does free up people's time to actually spend more on quality and improving the statistics rather than just kind of fairly boring, hard coding things into a spreadsheet or into a terminal. Chatbots we probably should use more. I think there's potential also to improve the user experience with our website. The ONS website is notoriously difficult to find things on, which is why most people use Google rather than the search function on the website. I'm sure some sort of intelligent chatbot could help on that score. I think where we would be a bit more nervous is on the stats production side. Although it can be useful to kind of identify outliers and do kind of basic quality assurance and validation, you don't necessarily want to create a black box where you just put all the data in and out crunch as a number. And this is really more a comment on data science models and ways of modeling data than it is on AI specifically. But for example, when we were doing some major methods development work on the house price index, we put all the valuation office data into a random forest model, and it was coming up with absolutely beautiful looking estimates at quite a local level, until we ran it again and the average house price in Camden halved, and we had no idea what had driven that. And so the fact that you can't attribute the outcomes to any kind of known statistical process, and you're effectively, if you're not careful, overfitting a model, means I think you really need to be quite careful about uses in kind of core statistical production. You need to be able to replicate, you need to be able to understand, and if you find some errors, you need to be able to trace them back and find out what caused them. And with a number of kind of basic data science models, that's not possible. So that would be an error. I'd be cautious. I think the other thing, and going back to the point about kind of robo-bulletins, I'm sure every NSI has played around with them, they're generally not very good. And you always need to have a human in the loop to exercise a degree of judgment. Otherwise, things happen that are unfortunate. Or even just as much as not quite getting the phrasing right. And I'm sure my colleagues like the ONS spend quite a bit of time thinking about the language and the words we use. Mindful of that, we need to be impartial, and we don't want to be overly subjective or overly colourful in how we describe the data. It's really important, I think, to be neutral and to accurately describe what's going on.
There's a bit of a tension, isn't there? Because a lot of economists are using new techniques to construct data because of the gaps that exist covering digital and AI. Yeah. So, the web scraping, synthetic data even, and so on. Grant, you raised the point about kind of vibe coding your own price index, and Chris, you talked about using LinkedIn data. What is your role relative to the research community creating its own data and the private sector holders of all of this data? How do we think about that landscape? Who wants to go first? Chris, you looked at me, so it's your turn.
Yeah, so in the European data space, we have a new regulation on access to privately held data. So we're again treading carefully with that one to see good use cases of it and to progress it along. But that's caused us in advance, I guess, to engage with private data holders like online retailers, credit card companies, even for health data. Right, so a little bit more sensitive stuff there too. And we're all thinking about a kind of a roadmap to using privately held data. And you've got to bring it into this discussion. That fits right into this discussion here, I think. The scanner data, we've all started experimenting with that on our price series. That needs a lot of work to process it. It's big volume data. The coding up of, so when we birth entities on our business register, that is fed from our tax authority. So giving a coder, an AI coder, to our tax authority to help businesses put their NACE codes as they file their returns, that's going to help us down the line. So that's the kind of engagement I think we need to do, and with researchers to help foster all these things and to come up with smart questions. That if I'm going to go out and talk to a jobs company, that I ask the right kind of questions and I'm in the right kind of space.
Jennifer?
Sure. So we're similar to you, Chris. We're exploring a lot of these different data sources. In fact, we're using a lot of these data sources. To answer your question of how does that compare to researchers or others doing the data, I think our value added is the integration of various data sources. So we're able to provide the complete picture as opposed to just piecemeal views from singular data sources. So I think that's where our strength lies. And again, we don't want to duplicate what's being done elsewhere, but that's something no one else is taking up that space.
Yeah, I mean, we really, when the pandemic hit in 2020, we literally had people knocking on our door every day saying, we've got some fabulous data and would you like to use it? Sometimes the data wasn't that fabulous when we looked at it. Sometimes it was. Daily, weekly financial transaction data, daily kind of spatial mobility data, et cetera, was incredibly useful during the pandemic. And indeed, if you go to the ONS website, you'll see that every week we publish real-time indicators. They have proved a useful supplement to official statistics. And in a few cases, scanner data being the obvious one, we have incorporated those into our headline statistics. I think a more related or adjacent, but a slightly different issue, it's probably is worth raising, is that over time, many of our kind of headline economic statistics are becoming hybrids combining administrative and survey-based data. Inflation numbers would be a good example, but national accounts as well. Now, that is, I'm sure, is improving the quality of the statistics we produce, but it's also producing the complexity and the risk. And it's really hard, for example, for the statisticians in the audience to calculate a confidence interval around national accounts that are based on a combination of 60 different data sources, administrative and survey-based. So there's always a trade-off. The other issue, of course, is the greater complexity and the more you use big data, particularly if you're in a monthly production cycle, the greater the risks if something goes wrong in terms of data ingestion or delivery or whatever. So we are pursuing better quality where there is a good business case to do so, but it does come at some cost and some potential risk.
So I'm going to come to members of the audience to ask questions or make comments in a minute. Just one final question is about the amenability of the private sector to helping still. And when I talk to the big tech companies, I've said to them, the story that is out there about AI is that it's going to cause a jobs apocalypse and psycho chatbots are getting your teenagers to kill themselves. You need a different kind of story. And indeed, we've seen the backlash against AI in the US in particular, partly because of that. And so they're starting to construct economic statistics and put them out. we've all, in our different jurisdictions, got frameworks that in theory allow us to access that kind of data. I just wonder how it's going. How easy is it?
Well, for me, for us, it's gone very well. So, we've got virtually all our supermarkets kind of volunteered the data to us in advance of legislation coming 2 years away. They said, well, I think they wanted to help. And you're dead right about COVID. Like, COVID was a time we tried to maintain a lot of that, the good things from that, and keep the momentum going. We have property listing data websites, helping us with data for our house price index. With the online retailers coming to us, asking us to engage with them on data. So I think that's nothing but a positive story. We haven't had to say, here's a big piece of legislation you want to once they know it's there and there's a safe, trusted mechanism to help us, and we're going to do responsible things with it, which I think we've earned. So far, we've earned the trust of society for that we should go ahead and use those private sources.
Did you want to add anything, Jennifer?
Sure. Similarly, we have also used integrated scanner data, many administrative data sources, as Andre was alluding to earlier in his presentation. I think the relationships are good. We're also getting data from banks, from many different sources, not the private data, but high-level data. I think trust is a currency that we have to maintain to keep doing this and to keep getting new sources of data. And I think the one thing that concerns me is reliability, because if they turn off the tap and we're dependent on it, then that produces some risks for us. But generally, I think it has definitely worked in our favor, and we just have to offset those risks with contingency plans.
Over to you. Who would like to ask questions? We'll take, there are a couple down here. We'll do the usual thing of collecting a batch of 3 and then turning back to the panel to see what you want to pick up.
We also have some online.
I have no online, so you'll have to bring them. Okay. So 2 here. And then was it you, Bart, afterwards? So those will be the first 3, and then I'll come to online. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering, because obviously, kind of about the flip side, so obviously AI is entirely based on the data that you put into it. So I was wondering if you guys have considered much about providing useful data so that we can maximize the most out of AI, because it's been a lot about what AI can do for the statistics we're making, I guess.
So feeding the AI models, thank you.
I didn't quite get the full gist of that. I didn't hear it, but I think I have something very similar. Over the years, statistical agencies have been learning from the academic community through conferences like this, but also through the research data labs that allow the collaboration of researchers. It provides you with ideas. So these maps of Canada with the little 1 square kilometer regions, we saw those coming out of the Centre for Economic Studies from researchers 20 years ago, and good things happened. Now with AI, there's lots of researchers just dying to use AI on these micro data sets. And I'm wondering what kind of procedures you're going to have in these research data labs to allow external researchers to get beyond SAS and R and Stata, but actually try some new stuff. So what's, and it's tricky because you're going to bring this stuff in-house and you're going to...
Good question. And then Bart in the middle up there.
Bart van Aert, University of Manchester. So I was linking your earlier question. I needed to think a little bit about where do we need it most, with the question just about how you work with companies. Of course, I'm interested in productivity, but I'm particularly interested in adjustment costs, because we all know this Brignoles J-curve, that it takes a long time before these kind of technologies translate themselves into productivity. But we don't really have a good handle on the cost. The way this is tested is by collecting a bunch of data from the financial sector, but it's not particularly helpful to do this. At the same time, we hear companies complain about regulatory cost, if there's more regulation coming and all those kind of things. So I think we need a really better understanding what are the barriers for companies to actually apply these kind of technologies. Are these costs real, and can we begin to collect this cost data? Because I think we're still we lack a lot of knowledge about that. So I'd like to have a response from the panel about that. Thanks.
Good first batch. Who would like to pick up what? Jennifer, you go first.
I'll go, I guess. Thank you for that. So for your question for could our data feed into AI, I mean, that's ultimately the goal. And I think what we need to do to position ourselves is to put our data in a format such as SDMX or .stat, which is favorable for AI to use. This is one of my dreams. Many times in my career have I heard, oh, I didn't realize you had that data, because we have so many data holdings and they're not always easy to find. So to maximize the use of the data is ultimately our goal, and what we're working towards. Are we there today? Maybe we're not optimized today. In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. In terms of the questions for researchers, I think that's an excellent point. We have our research data centers where they can do research, and we try to make the data available so that they can work in the most efficient way possible, and that's something we'll work towards. In terms of the third question, excellent point. We have the Canadian Survey of Business Conditions, where we asked some questions on AI. I think we approached your question about costs. We didn't quite get there, so maybe in future iterations that's something we could bear in mind.
Chris.
Yeah, so what statisticians dream about, that our data will be AI ready. So I have two kind of views on this. What if you're a secondary school child coming to our website to get data, right? We confuse the hell out of you with our precision. Right? I said we like to be precise. You ask for GDP, I'll give you 30 choices, right? And that's really difficult, and we lose people. And even if they try Google, they're not going to get the right one, right? So I dream that we have a lot of work to do on metadata, not just the descriptions that we put stuff onto two-dimensional databases with, but that we enhance all our metadata. And you said it, like SDMX is there, right? We've always had that. We know it's there. But we produce lots of nationally policy relevant data. It's not going to fit that. And am I going to have to do an SDMX IE or something, with all our GNI star and our whatever meshes in it. So I'm thinking of the secondary school kids. I'm also thinking of, if I ask Google, give me an official statistic on how well I'm doing. Let's tie it back in with the session before coffee. Is it going to give you GDP or life satisfaction, right? So we've got to produce a lot more metadata, I think, with our official statistics, both nationally and internationally, to try and get it all AI ready, because it's not there yet, and we've probably just got, I think, a lot of work to do on that.
Yeah. I think in the agentic world that's coming, most queries to statistical websites will be coming from AI agents rather than humans. So we need to make sure that we've got machine-readable data, we've got open data with APIs, that information is readily available. That's kind of, and we've got the right metadata. So all that's kind of basics, but it's not quite there yet. But building on that, and actually going back to the questions around the private sector, we've had both very good and challenging relationships with different private sector data providers. When half a dozen lawyers turn up for the conversation, you know it's not going to be a good one. And for example, in the UK, banks are not particularly open about showing their data, partly because they're mostly listed and they're terrified that something market sensitive will emerge from your use of the data. We've had more success with retailers, but even there, we're not yet at a point where we can share that prices microdata with academic researchers or others. I think that the challenge with private sector data providers is it takes time to build trust, and you have to kind of do it in baby steps almost, kind of get the data in the door to show that you're making good use of it, to kind of share some of your insights with the people that are providing you with the data, and gradually ease them towards a position where they might be willing to let you share that with other people. It was much easier during the pandemic, but of course we're not in a national emergency now, and you have to make the case as to why they should trust us and why they should let us kind of share some of that. But if we can, we certainly will. We've been talking about a kind of a prices microdata lab that we could open up to researchers, if that's possible. On financial transactions, again, there's lots of real potential there to do more, particularly at a kind of a subnational and regional level, because it's incredibly granular data. So there's definitely more that we can do, but it takes time and it's not always easy.
To follow up on the question about adjustment costs, is anybody here tracking how much companies pay for their AI model subscriptions? Because when I talk to companies, fear about how much they're going to go up and lock in is one of the issues?
Well, I think at the moment, if in the UK, for example, we have the Business Insights and Conditions Index or survey, BICS, which regularly asks people about AI adoption, but it's really quite crude. It's, are you using AI? What are you using it for? To really get a sense of how businesses and other organisations are using AI, what you would actually want is kind of firm level data on pull requests and tokens used by organisations from Anthropic and OpenAI and all the rest. I doubt that we will ever get that, but that would actually answer the question of who's actually using AI in a meaningful way beyond just somebody filling out a survey question. We may not be able to get that at a firm level. If we get that at least at an industry level for the UK, that would tell us something, I think. So that's, there are conversations exploring the possibilities there, but again, as with earlier examples with retailers and banks, it takes time.
I'm going to read a couple of online questions and then take one from over that side of the room, so get ready to stick your hands up over there. So one is that as more people are using AI to access statistics or find things out, how can the NSIs respond when the AI prioritises unofficial data, inaccurate data, over official data sources? So hold that one. Second one is about there are long-standing issues measuring intangible assets in the national accounts. How would you balance improving that measurement agenda alongside measuring AI? Who wants to go from this side of the room? Right there.
Thanks very much. John Cooper, Department of Science and Technology in UK. My question is, how should we as government analysts spend our time given the developments in AI? So if we assume the same number of analysts, data wrangling becomes more efficient, data visualization more efficient, but it also means that non-analysts can quite easily do visualizations or modeling with some really bad assumptions or black box. So given that, should we spend our time a bit differently and start producing more models so that they don't do it themselves, for example, or more time spent collaborating, storytelling, things that you've mentioned?
Okay, we'll start at this end this time.
I'll start with the last one. It's a great question. It's something I've been thinking about. I think the parallel to analysts in government would be what academics are doing. And there's kind of a barbell approach, which is on the one hand automating really basic, boring admin-y type tasks to free up your time to do the more interesting stuff. So any kind of routine tasks that takes up time that you can automate, people are starting to do that using Codex and Claude Code and all the rest. And then at the other end, doing quite advanced technical work. I mean, the conversations I'm having with Claude are kind of at graduate level economics. So I think there's potential at both ends. The question is then, what do you do with that time that you've freed up? And I think one of the things that analysts in government can do, apart from spending a bit more time digging a bit deeper into the statistics and coming up with the stories and doing a bit more analysis, is actually creating useful tools for people, including policy colleagues, for example, if you're in a policy department, that people can actually use and kind of generate their own scenarios or generate their own data visualization so that essentially your team don't have to do it all. Because, if you think about Jevons paradox, there's a Jevons paradox in government as well, which is there are never enough analysts to do all the things that policy colleagues would like them to do. So potentially you can improve the productivity of government economists and other analysts to actually do more, but partly by empowering colleagues to use those tools.
Chris, which would you like to pick up?
Well, I guess the online question struck me because I think we're there at that point now that online, you use a chatbot, you're going to get the wrong official. I'm pretty sure you'll get the wrong official statistic on GDP, right? I gave that example earlier. And I was hoping they might get life satisfaction instead of GDP. But if they get something from another source which is clearly wrong, what can we do with that? So I think it takes us back again to, I do think we have a lot of work to do to help feed AI, right? And we can do it. But just we didn't build our systems for AI in the first place. We built a lot of our systems to get out of paper and onto databases. We structured them two-dimensionally. Do we think of having table databases rather than just two-dimensional databases? So wouldn't you love to have your AI be able to feed inflation and GDP, what you researchers have in databases you pay for? wouldn't you love to have your AI be able to feed that off official statistics? So that should be very, very close. So I'd like to think we can get in ahead of the privately held data that, or data that's just out there that's misleading people. The other online question you have is a particular thing in mind, intangibles. So the big issue I think for this is that companies don't value this separately. Okay, so I think when you mentioned, Grant, about it all molding into one or melting into one over time, that this technology will be part of technology. As a statistician, to get a little bit nerdy, we've got to go out and measure that balance sheet. So we see the equity liabilities on one side, on the other side, what you expect to see, right? The plant, machinery. But for these big firms, that's nothing. Their intellectual property products are probably their biggest asset. Goodwill probably makes up the last bit of the balance sheet, and they don't deliberately go and value the other things. And we've had lots of international discussions about data, valuing data. So in the new sets of standards, we have methods we're developing on data as an asset, customer data as an asset. But AI has just come along a little bit late in the day to us after a 15-year discussion. And we have to bring AI into that debate too, about how do companies value that intangible that's being created. So if AI is creating data, not humans, should companies recognize that? And if they do recognize it, and the critical thing for us is if they then sell it, we've got to get into that game as well and be right on top of that.
Sure, a couple thoughts. Do I wonder if AI sometimes produces the wrong result? I know it does. I've tested it, and it's come up with the wrong result. I've asked, do you have data on X? And it says, no, it doesn't. And I'm like, I know you have data on X because I produce it. High level things we can do. I think Christopher covered that, making our data AI ready. We also have a framework for misinformation and disinformation. So the fact that my daughter is using AI to get some information and she has the wrong information, I can't stop that. But high level, we look in the media for misreported information, and we look at the severity and the impact, and if it's severe enough, and the impact, if there are many, many followers that this person has, then maybe we will put in a correction. So we've tried to prioritize accordingly. So the fact that one person in their living room might have the wrong information, there's not much we can do. But for the greater good, we do try to do that. For our what to do with that extra time, nobody's really complained about that to me. And said, I have all this extra time, what am I going to do? I think there's always greater demands. I think that what we're pushing for is to really understand the data and to be able to explain the phenomena. That's our value added, and that's where I'd like people to put time so they can actually answer, not just put all the data through a machine and say, I don't know why it went up. We want to be able to explain that. So that's where some of the extra time's going.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
I'll make a very quick point on that.
Yep.
If we don't do something with that extra time, we haven't had a productivity increase.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's something we have to kind of keep in mind. If we will not get the thing we think, we're all assuming productivity is going up here. So we've got to watch that.
I'm going to hold myself back from piling into this discussion, particularly about intangibles. We've got time for another round of questions. So I'm going to look at this side of the room first. Who would like to go? Or anybody in the balcony, you have to wave a lot because I can't see you. There's a hand in the balcony waving back there. Anybody over this side? One here. Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you very much. Tommaso Ciarla, UNU Merit and Sussex. Couple of very quick questions. The first one is whether we can improve our understanding of adoption of AI by using, for example, big data, web scraping, these kind of tools, which are still underused, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And we need a lot to know about adoption of these technologies. And the second question is more about the instead of talking about jobs, talking about our own profession, how you see our own role in the sense that if we can do lots of our job by using AI, including creating data, doing surveys, what should we do as a statistician? How can we contribute to that effort?
Can we help? Okay, there's one over here.
Yeah, Bernard Casey, London and Frankfurt. I wanted to ask a question primarily in the direction of Grant because he talked about it. There is a thing called the BICS survey in this country, which I only learnt about relatively recently. And I went, because I was told, well, you can find out what businesses are doing and how they are using something called AI. So I went and looked at it, and what I found was a series of cross-tabulations, tables of cross-tabulations. They weren't the most interesting cross-tabulations, and there was no explanation whatsoever. Now that seems to me to be a great failure to communicate, especially when that data set was introduced to me as, now you can see what people are doing with this thing.
Thank you. Is there a third in the room? In the middle there. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie Ricard from LSC. I wanted to pick up on something Chris said about international discussions and pressures. It sounds like from this discussion, national statistics offices are adopting AI and moving at different speeds. Is that correct? And if so, does that have implications for end users who use your data to make cross-national comparisons? Does it perhaps introduce not only structural breaks, but differences in the comparisons that I could and should be drawing? Thanks.
Very good, thank you. So one specifically for you, Grant, user complaint about BICS. I'll leave that to you. But why don't you start with that and pick up the others as you wish to.
So I did reference BICS earlier. It said that every couple of months we ask questions about AI. We are adding to the side of the core quarterly questions. It's a rough indication based on what business tell us they're doing. But it doesn't get to Chris's point about the intensity of use, or indeed the question from the chief economist at DCIT about kind of what's actually going on in those organisations. And for that, you need something a bit more detailed and granular, something like in the UK, the Management Expectation Survey. And we're hoping that the next wave of that, partly because it has a panel element as well as a cross-section, will give us a better idea of actual versus planned adoption and impact on productivity and business revenue. So I think that would start to unpack what's actually going on in UK firms. I would say the big survey data is always readily available on the Secure Research Service, and a lot of people do use it, but it's a snapshot. So take it for what it is, I think. We will be publishing more analysis, more synthesis, which tries to bring a number of data sources together in the UK and tell a bit more of a story, rather than kind of being a bit disparate in different surveys. But really, we're just scratching at the surface here. There's potentially a lot more that we and other NSIs could do, I would say.
Chris?
Yeah, I guess on the tools and web scraping, and we literally have to hold our people back from doing these. Like, they're so enthusiastic. Like, we're the right bunch of people to be doing this type of thing. I guess we're holding them back for a reason. We keep mentioning this word trust. We don't want to go too far, too fast, and lose trust with the general public. And we do something that loses. So we're a cautious bunch of people. But you don't have to worry about that. I think we're so keen to make progress on all these items. The lady from LSE who talked about structural breaks. So similarly, like we work really hard not to have structural breaks in data. So with the new standards we're bringing in over the next couple of years, we're going to push those back the time series as far as we can, because we do not like to introduce that kind of thing. If we do, we document it and try and be as transparent as possible. But let's take an example like industry coding. If we use AI for industry coding, it might pick up a slightly different trend in it. But we will spend I think the others can answer that too, but we'll spend a lot of time checking for that.
Jennifer.
Okay, in terms of using tools, I know at Statistics Canada, yes, you have many eager people who are trying to do it. We've tried to be a little more systematic on it. First of all, a lot of the work, the return on investment is not always as great as we originally hoped. So we make sure we have scalability and a return on investment, and that the work that's being done can be used elsewhere. Maybe that's something internationally that we can learn from each other and have some tools that are used. And we do also make sure that the tools are that people are using the approved tools, and that we encourage experimentation, but that, again, nothing in a way that would ever break their guardrails, and that it would never break trust or do anything unethical. So I hope that answers that question. In terms of the breaks, again, improved data quality. We do make sure that we have consistent time series through time. Improved data quality should just make for a more accurate picture. Due to AI, it shouldn't cause a break in the data, in theory.
I had meant to come back to the panel for a final round of questions, but I've run out of time, and I'll be sacked as a chair of ESCoE panels if I let us carry on. There'll be lots more in the programme about AI, about productivity, about intangibles, so more to come over the next couple of days. But please join me in thanking our excellent panel, and thank you for the questions.